Bring our special meeting to order. Please stand for the flag salute. Rich?
This joint special meeting was called pursuant to the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Law. Notices of this meeting were faxed to the Atlantic County Record, Atlantic City Press, Camden Courier, and Star Ledger on February 8th, 2023. In addition, copies of notices were posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building and filed in the office of the municipal clerk on the aforementioned date. Notices on the bulletin board have remained continuously posted. Proper notice having been given, the municipal clerk is directed to include this statement in the minutes of this meeting. Minutes of this meeting should also reflect the purpose for which the meeting was called. Mr. Cheek?
Here.
Mrs. Link?
Here.
Mr. Schenker?
Here.
Dr. Witherspoon?
Here.
Mayor Patali?
Here.
Okay, roll call for the planning board. Mayor Patali?
Here.
Richard Cheek?
Here.
Wayne Choice? Here. Dennis Kell? Here. Jack Percy? Harry Rogers? Al Womblesdorf? Here. Harry Balicki? Here. Angela Harris-Moore? Robert Fink? Here. Okay, roll call for zoning board. Wayne Choice? Here. Bill Chrisman? Here. Pete D'Amico is absent. Diane Fox? Here. Dr. Carmen? Here. Bruce Stry? Here. Elaine Valentino? Here. Mark Cohen? Here. Ray Kyleman? Roll call for the Industrial Commission. Jack Carson? Here. Roy Foster? Here. Robert Laws? Lucas McFarland?
Here.
Dr. Newman? Dr. Roy?
Here.
And Charlie Pritchard.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and start our discussion with redevelopment and the rehabilitation processes. Emily?
Good evening. Jim Maley from Maley Givens is also here with us. Mr. Maley is going to go over the history of the designation, the initial designation that took place in 2018. He and Mr. Schenker, when Mr. Schenker was mayor, actually worked on that initial designation. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Maley, and then we'll get into the other specifics.
Excellent.
Thanks. And listen, pretty historic, great meeting, the joint meeting of all the boards and your governing body all together.
Yeah, do you want to grab that mic?
Oh, I should grab that one? Okay.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
You got it. Thank you for the chance to talk about this. It's, I understand there's been a lot of questions and issues over the last few months, and I want to kind of take you through a little bit of the process and talk a little bit maybe about going forward, about some things that we might be able to do that would work a little bit better for some of the issues that have come up. But let me just start out. Redevelopment is a creation of state law that was put together in order to help towns encourage development that they wanted to encourage and to help it along where the development was particularly difficult, where the private marketplace was not moving to develop and the town wanted to have some development, either because of environmental issues on a property or because the market was such that you weren't getting development that towns wanted. And redevelopment has, for 50 years now, been a growing, effective tool in a lot of towns in New Jersey. When I first started working with the township, the words I remember hearing from the committee at the time were, we are tired of sitting back and watching towns around us bring in ratables and development that we think could be and should be here because they're using redevelopment tools and we're not. So there was the beginning of a process to review what that redevelopment is, what it means, how it works, and then projects have been done here in town. You have a number of projects that have been accomplished, and a lot of the basic tools for redevelopment have been put in place. So I'm going to try, and it gets a little, listen, the state law that was written can get a little confusing because they use the words redevelopment and rehabilitation kind of in different places with the same meaning, and it gets a little fuzzy and confusing. And I just tell you that at the start. So the township back in 18 did a designation of the entirety of the township as a rehabilitation area. That designation was done following the state law. There's a planning study that was done that reviewed the sections of the town, and all of the town was determined to fit one or another of the criteria that the state law requires. And they require criteria like that there's sewer systems or infrastructure that's over a certain age, or housing that's over a certain age, or certain environmental issues that predominate. But it was determined that the governing body adopted a resolution, and it designates the entirety of the township as a rehabilitation area, okay? There was also a plan, a quote, plan adopted, okay? And the plan that was adopted didn't change any zoning anywhere. It just incorporated all of your existing zoning laws and set up the adoption of that plan, which is no different than what your zoning already is, but adoption of that plan puts the township in a position to utilize authority and power under the redevelopment laws, okay? You will also have certain areas within the town that have gone through a separate process, which is a redevelopment designation. That process requires certain other criteria to be shown, and that is a process that was undertaken for certain areas in town, and that process was done before the planning board. The planning board then reached the conclusion to recommend to the governing body to designate certain redevelopment areas, okay? So that's kind of procedurally, you have these areas in town. What does any of this mean? What does this mean? So the redevelopment laws, what I like to say is that it gives the governing body and the township the ability to act more like a business with respect to encouraging the development that the township wants to encourage, okay? You can use it as much as you want. You can use it as little as you want. And the process allows the governing body to act more quickly, to act and strike business deals in order to encourage development that they want. And it allows them to work with developers, again, for projects that they want to see move forward. That can involve modifications to zoning. Towns are allowed to, not that it's ever been entertained here, but towns are allowed to actually invest money into projects to help encourage them along. That only
Mr. Malley?
happens.
Mr. Hold on. I just want to note that Jack Percy just arrived. Thank you.
But it gives a wide berth of the ability and the powers of a governing body in order to move on redevelopment projects. The process, so there's the designations. Designations have been completed, one for the entire township as a rehab area. The certain spots in town have been designated as redevelopment areas. What's the difference between the redevelopment area and the rehabilitation area? Okay? The redevelopment area designation gives the governing body 2 additional powers that it doesn't have in rehabilitation. One of those is a long-term pilot, okay? A pilot in excess of 5 years. And the second, if the township includes it, is condemnation, eminent domain, okay? So redevelopment can be done with eminent domain or without eminent domain. That's a choice of the governing body to decide before it starts that process, okay? Only difference between redevelopment areas and rehab areas is redevelopment areas get those 2 additional powers, okay? So the entire township is a rehab area that lets the governing body act more like a business to try to help encourage and to spur projects along. And redevelopment provides those 2 additional powers if the town wants to use it. So the marketplace today, towns today, I'll just tell you that developers are looking for, and because they can find it pretty much in any town in New Jersey, some opportunities, if they think their project is going to be attractive to the governing body, to the township, they'll make approaches about help that they could possibly get through the redevelopment process. Sometimes that's, in our experience, it's as little as a zoning change to help make that process more certain for the developer. Before they go spend the money, they want to make sure they know that the town is in favor of a project, and they can get some zoning changes that will help make the project happen. On the other extreme of the spectrum, there's requests for tax abatements, for abilities for the first few years to level up to a rate and paying taxes, financial incentives that come that can be requested purely up to the township as to whether or not they want to do that, what they want to do. Okay, so that's generally redevelopment and rehabilitation. There's of course a lot of turns and different processes you go through as that development goes ahead. Before I go over, I want to go over a little something that in consultation with I keep wanting to say mayor, with Committeeman Schenker, with the mayor, we've put together, and hearing what the comments have been from the governing body and the public, we've put together a little bit of some suggestions on how a process could be changed here to help give a greater, going over and above legal requirements, and to give more visibility to projects, okay? But I want to first just go through real simply, kind of how the ordinary project happens, what that process is, okay? So typically, a developer will come in, Disney's coming in with a project, they want to build Disneyland Mid-Atlantic, okay? And they want to locate it here in Hamilton. They want to talk to the town because you're not zoned for Disney here, and they want to come in and make sure they can get that project to work out. So they will come in, township will take a look at what their concept is, what they're thinking about, and then if they so choose, the governing body can authorize an MOU, a memorandum of understanding. And what we have them do the MOU for is 2 purposes. One is to post an escrow to cover the township costs to review those concepts and plans, for professional review so the township doesn't go out of pocket, have the developer post that escrow. And the second is, what's given in exchange for that to a developer is, look, for this area that you're looking at, this property, we're going to talk to you and only you for a period of 90 days. And that begins that process of everyone exchanging what the concept's going to be, what the township's desires would be, what the developer's trying to do, kind of go through that process with an eye toward developing a redevelopment agreement, okay? And whatever else might come to pass as part of this project. One of the advantages of redevelopment for a township is you get the ability to exert much more control over projects than the usual municipal land use process allows you, okay? The example I always give is if the township has Disney's come with the project, but the township, for where this area is, the township thinks it should be all blue shutters on these buildings to fit in with the character of the neighborhood. A land use board, planning board, zoning board, can't say to the applicant, hey, look, you got to paint, we want all the shutters to be blue, okay? A governing body in redevelopment can say, hey, listen, we want all these shutters to be blue. Now, that's a simple little example, but in the process, it is where there are local issues that are of concern, off-site traffic improvements. Can't do that in planning boards and zoning boards without some restrictions on it, limits of what you can ask for or do. Redevelopment, you don't have those, okay? You don't have those limitations. And what towns typically find attractive in this process is an ability to help, not only help a developer get a project moved along, but in exchange for that, get a project that matches more closely what the town would like to see out of that project, okay? So redevelopment gives more power to the governing body, and with that comes an ability to help control what that project is going to be to a level that is greater than the usual land use process. Now, all of those projects still go through site plan review. They still go through all the site plan reviews, still got to get it evaluated for stormwater and traffic and all of the things that come in the land use process. But it is done in a way where the larger, more global issues the town can address, and it's in exchange for some advantage to the developer with respect to zoning or planning or financial issues or whatever else it might be, okay? It varies with each project. Some projects ask very little out of a town. Some projects ask a lot out of a town. Whether or not a town does it depends on an evaluation of how bad's the property today. You know, are we trying to fix a problem here? Contaminated site that isn't going anywhere. An apartment complex that is half empty and having troubles, okay? Well, it's part of what the township wants to fix, wants to do, and how much the town wants the project. How much do you want the project? You obviously don't do all that work and extend all that for a project that governing body says we don't need this, we don't want this, this is not what we're looking for, okay? It gives that flexibility that if you do want to encourage a project, you can, okay? So let me, I don't want to talk forever in a day, but let me just go through a little bit on the process and what we're suggesting, okay? What we're just suggesting as a way. Let me put it this way: the sense that we have is that one particular project in town had advanced, and people were concerned that they were not aware of it, did not know about it, and that something was happening, something quick was happening. And so what we're suggesting is setting up a process, kind of your own process, not required by state law, but one that helps open that process up a little bit more to give notice of people so that they have more of an opportunity to see and hear a project that's going on. For a lot of these projects, most people won't mind. You know, they won't come out. They won't matter. Or at least they'll come out, find out what it is, they'll be fine. I keep thinking like there's a CarMax and some of the redevelopment projects that are not exactly large scale, you know, not exactly big controversies. So let me just go through with you. One of the things that happens here in Hamilton is a property, someone comes in with a project, okay? And they come in with a project, and the first place they get sent to is your zoning workshop, okay? And when they go into that zoning workshop, they have a lot of professionals, a lot of members of boards are all there, okay? Well, what we have seen is when they come out of that workshop, if they are viewed generally favorable, you know, people aren't telling them there's no way in hell this is ever going to happen, they come out of it with a sense that, like, they've met with the township and the township is on board, okay? And that's not really kind of what's happened. They've met with a couple representatives from different boards and professionals to get kind of a first take, okay? So what we're suggesting is for projects that are redevelopment projects, and the developer will identify these, that they want to ask for some help in redevelopment, or they would like to talk to someone about redevelopment, that those projects would first get reviewed by the governing body, and they would take a look. And if there's any opening to any willingness to explore any redevelopment powers with them for that project, then the governing body can make that call before it starts that zoning workshop process, okay? For the majority of your projects, they're all going to be going right to zoning workshop. For some projects that want to go through redevelopment, they won't go through that process first. They'll go to the governing body to take a look. Then the governing body can decide, okay, we think we're okay with this. We would like to talk about it more. This early stage, that MOU is simply an agreement that we're going to talk some more, okay? We're going to negotiate to try to see if there's a project we like, if we want to move forward, we're going to start that process. The main purpose of it is to get the developer to post the money to cover the township's review of that process, okay? So we get started with that process. Can you slide it just a little bit for me? So if it is redevelopment, then we would say the next step, slide it down a little bit more for me, when the governing body considers whether or not to enter into an MOU, okay, that memorandum of understanding, that first step that says we're going to start discussions with the developer, that there would be notice that would be provided using the zoning planning standard to property owners within 200 feet, okay? So that would give a first notice to people in an area that they can look at what the town is going to start discussing, okay? They can let their voice be heard when that's happening, and they can, and then the governing body can make decisions, whether or not they want to continue those discussions or whether they don't. But that first step would get, we think would give more of an ability on neighborhoods to know that something is being discussed, would let everybody be more comfortable that there's not a backroom deal getting struck, because any agreements that happen down the road still have to be all done in public session and notice and all that stuff, all that has to happen. So we're suggesting that there's a first, on that MOU adoption, when they're starting discussions, there's notice that goes out to folks in the surrounding neighborhood, okay? Can you slide it down a little bit? Brett, we'll get to questions in a bit, okay? So if there's any zoning changes that are happening as part of that project, that happens by ordinance, okay? So very often what will happen is if a project, and again, this is the value to a redeveloper, a value on most of these projects is that there will be some changes made to zoning in order to make the project conforming, okay? And that'll be done with the governing body by ordinance and be determined with, it's almost always in consultation with the planner, the township planner, engineer, go over, is this okay? Would this work? Would this be okay here? This is the process that we followed on every one of these projects, okay? An ordinance gets introduced, it goes to the planning board. The planning board determines whether or not that zoning change is consistent with the master plan for every one of your projects that have happened, gone to completion. They've all been determined to be consistent with the master plan. Go ahead, you just slide down for me a little bit. Second reading, done, public meeting, notice of it, and then there's an agreement, again, public meeting has to be adopted, an agreement has to be adopted that gives out what the project timetables are, all of that. So what we're suggesting is an earlier start to a public notice to let people know that discussions are happening, okay? That's the major change, and this is all, you can't see the draft so well in this, but the whole point of this is for discussion, okay? For us all to hear what your concerns are, to talk about it, and see how we can change this process to make it clearer to everyone. I think that, well, the value of a redevelopment designation and the existence of it, you can never use it, okay? A town can decide, we never want to use it, okay? And I'll go back to Art Schenker. We had, way back when I remember in the early days, he was like, never authorize eminent domain. Never, never, never. Like, we're not going to do that. We're not going to happen. And I'll tell you what I told him then. There will be a property. There will be something in town at some point or another where it will be appropriate to use it. It'll be the place where if Disney wanted to come in looking at the racetrack, right? And the racetrack wanted $4 billion, okay? And it was holding up what you all believe, what everybody believed was going to be like a great development, a wonderful thing here. Might be the situation where you think about discussing and using eminent domain. If you've got an environmentally contaminated property, which happens a lot, where you can't find the owners, okay? You can't find the owners. You're not even a fight. You can't locate them. We've used eminent domain in those circumstances to go take that property. So redevelopment gives these powers and authority which you can use or you can never use, okay? It's entirely up to the governing body about what steps you want to take. So that's kind of, I think I've talked way too long. So you don't have to agree, but way too long.
You can have 2 more
there.
minutes.
What's that?
You can have 2 more minutes.
No. I think I've touched it all. But whatever you want to do, you want to open up.
I'm going to open it to committee with any questions the committee may have.
Not to drag us on, but I think it's very important that we touch on the tax or the pilot, how the pilot works, and where the tax dollars we receive, the fact that they come to us and not other entities.
You want me to talk about that?
Yes.
Just for a brief minute. Because I think there's some confusion on why we're giving tax breaks to companies and how we're giving away tax dollars. And the reality of it is we actually gain tax dollars over a 5-year or a 10-year process.
So payments in lieu of taxes, couple things to point out. Number one, you're only talking about new money, okay? You're only talking about increases in assessments. If one of the levels where people, the developers can never pay less than what the taxes were on the property in the year before the pilot went into effect, okay? So it's always, they're never going below that number. For your tax dollar, and I won't have your numbers correct, but for every dollar in taxes that the township collects, the township gets to keep 20 cents, roughly. So you get to keep 20 cents. So the pilot says, instead of paying $1 developer, you're going to be paying 70 cents. But the 70 cents all stays with the town, except for 5% of those 70 cents gets paid to the county, okay? So if you were getting 20 cents out of the dollar of taxes while giving a savings to the developer, you also are increasing the revenues coming into the town, okay? That's why you see so many towns everywhere around you doing it. They're doing it because it's an incentive, and I just suggest to you that in today's marketplace, in your area, actually everywhere in the state, it is the standard. It is what tons of towns are doing, and they're doing it in order to try to attract that development in. Whenever that period of time ends, when there's breaks that are given, It goes on the rolls at full taxes, and you've created a rateable. So it sets off those ripples of increasing commerce in the town, increasing jobs in the town, all of those other things that most every township in the state's trying to do.
I have a question. I was chair of the planning board when all this went through. It's my understanding, I get a lot of questions, why is the whole town designated? I believe that if a resident does an addition or renovation or any improvement whatsoever to their home, anywheres in this township, for the work they've done, they're available for a tax abatement.
So do we have an ordinance? We have an ordinance in place here. Okay. So the rehabilitation, with the rehabilitation designation comes the ability for residential properties to get a 5-year abatement. Okay. So if you put the new addition on the house, right? You always hear everybody in Jersey, yeah, I put a new addition on and got a bigger tax bill, right? Because now you've increased the value of your property, your assessment's going to go up, boom, you get hit with a bigger number. The rehab designation, and we did. I remember back when we did this, when we did the 18, we put in place the process that you can get, I think it's state law limits it to $25,000, but $25,000 of an increase in assessment to your property stays off the books for 5 years after you do something that improves the value. So if you've, again, it's increasing the value of your property. And that goes back to, remember the first rule I told you about pilots, like you're never paying less, like you're paying, it's on the increase of what you've done. So the idea is we give people a break for a while for doing that good thing that we think as a community is a good thing. And then after that period of time, now they're on the tax rolls, and it's helping everybody.
I have a question.
Yeah, I do too.
I understand abatements. I understand the incentive. I understand us bringing this to our township to bring more revenue in the future. My question was, how long is a long-term abatement? How long can a person get an abatement?
So a business can be, a long-term abatement is from 5 years to 30 years.
Okay.
And it can be any length of time within that period.
So that abatement, you're not collecting more taxes on that project if we say, oh, we'll give them an abatement for 20 years.
No, it's not. No, it's not that there's no taxes. It's that there's a payment in lieu of taxes. Okay? So I'm trying to think of like an example I can give you guys. A standard payment in lieu of taxes. Say it's a 30-year term. Okay? We're going to run for 30 years. It'll have a base level that'll be paid for, say, the first 7 years. And then the next 7 years, it'll be at 20% of what the taxes otherwise would be. And then it would, understanding it could never be less than it was when taxes were last paid, full taxes were last paid. So I got an apartment complex, 1,000-unit apartment complex. Taxes were $250,000, $18 million renovation of the project. Town's all on board, does a 30-year pilot. So under the statute, they would be paying a 0 for the first 7 years, okay? But they don't pay 0. They have to pay $235, which was the number before, okay? So they pay that number, and then the next 7 years, they'll pay 20% of what taxes would be, or the 235 number, and then for the next 7 years, they'll pay 40%, and the next 7, 60, and it goes on a sliding scale over that time. That's the statutory formula for it, in a nutshell. I'm simplifying.
In those taxes, 95% comes here,
Stay here.
5% goes to the county.
Correct. Correct. And it's, you know, it can be used a lot of different ways. In Woolwich and Gloucester County, they're doing pilots with a bunch of development down there. They're using that money for the first 6, 7 years to pay for sewer infrastructure along Route 322 there so that they don't cost taxpayers to put that in, okay? So for the first 6 or 7 years, those pilot payments are being devoted to those capital expenses. And then after the 7 years, that money will now be able to flow into the general fund and be able to use to help everybody with tax bills. So there's a lot of different uses on what you do with the money and how you structure it.
But that's done in the very beginning. Like if there's a apartment complex, I'm just making something up, and they're gonna do 100 or 1,000 apartments, that 30-year abatement is done in the beginning.
It's done in the it would be done in the very start. It has to be done actually before the redevelopment work is done,
Okay,
okay?
right, so
Decisions are made early on,
in the very beginning,
very beginning.
and it's all documented.
Oh, yeah. It's, the pilot agreements have to be adopted by ordinance, okay? So there's the first reading, it's advertised, like, even if you don't do some of the things we're talking about, heightening, kind of raising what your public input will be, just the plain old vanilla doing ordinance, it still has to get advertised, public hearing on it to do a pilot agreement, okay? A payment in lieu agreement,
Thank you.
okay?
The other question I had, for instance, I spoke to a person who had just painted their house, but they didn't go before a redevelopment, so they felt that they couldn't get any advantage through the redevelopment or abatement program.
So painting your house probably alone not going to make you eligible, okay? Because the abatement is on the increase in your assessment, okay? So unless you had a particularly horrible color of paint that affected your value, painting your house is probably not going to increase the value of your house, okay?
Yeah, but they had done other,
Other things, they simply, your tax assessor, I don't know if it's standardized, but you can standardize it that, when they do building permits and they're getting to the end of it, a lot of towns, they'll just mail people the application, fill it out, you send it in, and you get that abatement, you get that break.
so if a person wants to put an addition to their house, and they don't go before the zoning board or planning board, what happens there?
It's not triggered by going to a board. It's triggered by an increase in your assessment. So if you don't need any land use approvals to put an addition onto your house, okay, and you're within code, you fit within code, you go in and you apply for a building permit, right? You do your building permit. As you get to the end of it, when you're getting near your CO, you can request from your assessor and you can file a form. And if your assessment's going to increase, your assessor will give you that break, okay? So you don't have to go in front of any board, you don't have to come here, you don't have to do any of that.
So basically, what we were trying to accomplish was for people to improve their facilities, add on to their facilities, and to my understanding, everything had to go through redevelopment. Is that true?
No.
No?
People that are doing work on their house, they can just choose to go, file their application and go do that. Most of the projects that you've had have been where the developer has asked to have discussions about that. But there's a whole other world of, I don't know where the planning board and zoning board folks are sitting, but there's a whole nother world of people that are still getting applications approved for site plan, variances, all that relief that never touched the redevelopment process.
Yeah, because a lot of times the water runoff, someone decides to do an addition, but they're not considering the runoff of their water to their neighbor. So where does that come in?
So that's the building, so all of that would be your building code, okay? If it's a large enough, and I don't know the intricacies of what requires site plan, but typically if it's a large enough addition, you may need to go through site plan at the planning board. And when you do that, all that stormwater will be reviewed. That all gets reviewed. If you're doing an addition that does not trigger site plan, then your building code official, when he's looking at whether, he or she is looking at whether or not to approve that, is looking at that time, when they issue those permits. Those can, if it's somebody's house addition, probably not going to go through a redevelopment process. If it's, a company's office building and they're adding on, a new wing, they may want to come talk to the town about redevelopment. They don't have to. And even if they come talk to you, you don't have to. You can say, nah, we don't really want, we're not interested in seeing that project happen there. We don't want Disney there, so no thank you. Okay?
So this tax abatement that's available to all the residents who own houses, if they want to put an addition on, they could take advantage of this because the entire township has been listed as rehabilitation.
Rehabilitation.
So if
correct.
that were to be taken away,
That
then,
goes.
They don't qualify.
then you don't qualify anymore.
Yeah, but
So that addition I put on my house that I haven't closed out my CO yet, I'd end up having to pay full taxes.
Correct.
we did in the historic area, we did a tax abatement.
Yes.
Okay, without redevelopment, a tax abatement. Now, in a lot of these communities that you have come involved in, were 75% of them under the restrictions of the Pinelands?
Oh, yeah, we represent Middle Township, Galloway, we got Pinelands left and right, absolutely.
Okay, but why should we endeavor an entire township when 75% of the township is under Pinelands restrictions?
Well, well, first of all, it's not why should you do it. You did it. Okay, it's been done in 18, okay?
Yeah.
But on why, I would submit to you that Pinelands is a reason why you would want it to have that designation. Because in the event there is a development that you like, okay, that you want to happen, many times Pinelands can give reasons why that should not happen, okay? And it is very often a give and take and discussion with Pinelands about how could a development be changed? What could we do? Where would this be? How do we, move the legs here, do this, do whatever we have to do. So if Pinelands is an issue on a project, which very often it is, the rehabilitation designation and those redevelopment powers that come with that gives the township a greater ability to assist in countless ways, okay? I could spend the night giving you examples of how it's been used very non-traditionally, okay? But it is, for every obstacle or thing you think that is a deterrent to any development, in the case where you want that development to happen, the redevelopment or rehab designation gives you more power and authority to help make that project happen. Or you can also just say, Pineland said no, we say no, done. That's it, we don't want to deal with it, okay?
Well,
Jim?
when you're changing, when you're invading zoning rules such as RD5, RD20, RD215, and the people have decided to live in those areas, is that fair to put the properties close to them or in that RD area in jeopardy?
So where you allow a project, what the proximity is to other neighborhoods, where you do that is entirely up to the governing body, okay? It's your choices, your decision. You've got to have a consensus going forward on how, where, what you do with that, okay? It is every zoning change that's been made on redevelopment plans, as is required by law, has gone through your planning board.
CMP?
And they determine if it's consistent with your master plan, okay? And everyone here has been determined to be consistent. I'll tell you, it doesn't have to be that way, okay? If the planning board were to determine it's not consistent with the master plan, a governing body still has the power to adopt that change. It just, there's a requirement that they have to put their reasons on the record, okay? They have to say why. What benefit they see, have to give the reasons why and put it on the record. But on every one of yours, there's been a consistency with the master plan. I don't know which specific, the RD5, I don't know which specific one you're talking about, but I know every one that we've done has been, that's
Well, the
gone through
Trophy
that.
Park, Trophy Park.
So the park, so the whole park concept never, got into an MOU stage, okay? Where there were discussions, the beginning of discussions.
They didn't come to us.
Listen, I understand there's issues about how that happened. There was a resolution that the governing body adopted to authorize the MOU.
Under the
which,
consent agenda, okay.
wh-
Whether it was or wasn't, but
I
it
got
was
you.
not discussed with us prior to that.
I hear you, okay?
Okay.
And so that's a matter that we're trying to give you suggestions about how to make sure that doesn't happen, okay, so everyone's aware. But it's also like that got to a point, it never advanced to where there was a project that was approved or conceptually approved by the governing body. Because then you would have a zoning ordinance, okay, the redevelopment plan, you have an ordinance that would get that first reading, would have to go to the planning board, have them look at it, determine if there's a consistency. Like, I understand people had objection to it. I hear you. I don't have an opinion one way or the other. I understand people had objections. For that one, why that didn't happen is it never advanced to that point. It was back at the beginning of discussions. That's the only answer I have for you. Had it progressed and there was a concept that was agreed to in principle, then there would have been drafts done of zoning, that would have been introduced by ordinance, it would have come to planning board, all of that would have happened. But it never got there. It never got to that point.
Jim, if I may, in interest of time here, I think this meeting is more about where we're headed in the future, not what happened in the past. And I think things that you see on this flow chart here are, were put in place to not allow that to happen again. But before we move on, I'd like to make one comment about anybody doing improvements under rehabilitation. In order to get that pilot of the 5 years, you have to apply for it within 30 days of final CO. That's very important that people are aware of that, because I've seen it in numerous cases where people have allowed it to go beyond 30 days. And unfortunately, we can't do anything about it. That's a state law. That we can't say, oh, well, 45 is okay. That it's 30 days and that's all you have. So I think it's important for people to know that.
Anybody else on committee? Open it up for public. Can you put the microphone back, I guess, and we'll have you sit back down, I guess. Come on up.
His knees are hurting by now.
Good evening. 2 questions. I know a little
Please state
bit
your
about
name for the
Maureen
record.
Bugden, Mays Landing, Morningside Drive. I know a little bit about redevelopment and rehabilitation, but because this is a public meeting, one, thank you for not wanting eminent domain. I don't think it's fair. I don't agree with it. But 2, more importantly, what's the downside? Knowing everything I know, what's the downside? Why would we not want this? And I think I already know the answer, but I want to hear it from you.
I'm the wrong guy to ask. I don't, because I don't see a downside in it, purely because it's the control of the governing body whether you do something or not, okay? And even in places where we've been, where a redevelopment project going forward has been crazy controversial, okay? And like hundreds of people out yelling and screaming. If the governing body decides like that, they think it's best for the community, then that's what they do. That's what they took oaths for. Like, that's what they do. So It's not, there's nothing mandatory in any of this. You can decide to do something or decide not to do something, okay?
Excuse me, but we can do eminent domain because you said that earlier.
No, there's only one, isn't there one, there's one, go ahead, there's only one spot.
Only the cotton mill area has been declared a condemnation redevelopment area. And that was done strategically and 2020, I
2020,
believe.
I believe it was.
And that got the developer to the table, and now we're at a point with them that, it looks like we're moving forward and are in real negotiation on a redevelopment agreement. But that's the only property in the township that's been declared in an area in need with condemnation authority.
Only the reason why I asked the question because it's on the document that it can be offered in the area in the need of redevelopment. That can happen.
It can, the committee would make a decision at the time that they choose the property that they're going to be evaluating as to whether or not they're going to authorize non-condemnation or condemnation.
Right.
And that's done at the very beginning.
Okay.
With the cotton mill, that designation was done in 2005. And at that time, state statute, any designation carried with it the authority to exercise eminent domain. That has to be expressed in a redevelopment plan. And so your redevelopment plan for the cotton mill was amended in 2020
Right.
to authorize use of eminent domain.
All right, I got it. But it can be, but it would have to come before the body.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
And I'll even add one little piece of that, which is the state law requirements now are that when you are going to designate an area and want to include condemnation authority, you need to advertise it that way.
Okay.
So you need to give notice to the property owners that are affected. When you advertise the action you're going to take, it has to say it's a condemnation redevelopment area. So the state law has set up some more requirements to let everyone know, hey, we're looking about having condemnation authority here. Come out and tell us your thoughts,
Thank you.
okay? Sure.
Well, I would say that the cotton mill has been on the, minds of everyone in our community for many years, so there would be absolutely no objection to that procedure because of where it is and how it is and what it looks like.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying earlier, that even though I read a lot of people that are opposed to it, what I used to tell them all is together we can find a place in your town where just about everyone's going to agree that place, it should be that place. Doesn't always happen, but a whole lot of the time. And here, again, having that authority doesn't mean you have to use it. Because you had that authority, that's what's gotten a property owner to step up to make changes and do things, okay? Because they're worried you might use it. So just the threat of it gets action, okay?
Not why I stood up, but one word on eminent domain. Are you talking about eminent domain on residential units?
No.
Not at all.
No, oh,
Okay,
no,
because
we're
there
not
is an
talking.
Okay,
yeah.
that's fine.
No.
Because there is an ordinance in the township against eminent domain on residential. Okay, that's fine. My main concern is use variances. And it seems to me, and I've thought this from the beginning, and I still think it now, what this does, and you talked about the zoning stays the same in the whole township, am I correct?
Under the ordinance that was adopted as part of the rehabilitation designation, the zoning is exactly the same. It just incorporates your zoning.
Okay, so if you want to developer, and can we use, what's the Trophy Park, can we use that as an example?
Well, it's probably not the best example. Why
Well,
don't we use
it's-
one?
well, I should-
How about Carmack's, a project that everybody
Well,
likes?
okay, well,
Because there were
okay.
changes made for that.
Okay, well, let's talk about
Okay.
CarMax just for a
Yeah.
second. CarMax is in a, I think the zone is highway commercial, or it's a commercial zone. Okay, so what you did, you took a commercial enterprise and put it in a commercial zone, okay? I don't think anybody would have too much trouble with that, okay? The only issue I have with that, as an aside, used cars are not, the sale of used cars by other than a new car dealer are not permitted in the township, okay? Can you explain to me why that, and I read the minutes, okay, and the use variance was not spoken about in the minutes on the CarMax at all. So how did the planning board, okay CarMax selling used cars, and that's all they sell? They are a national retailer of used cars without a new car franchise. So how was that not even mentioned?
Well, it is mentioned.
Excuse me,
And
Jim?
here-
Jim?
Yep.
Can I
Sure.
say something about that? I believe further in the ordinance, it reads that as long as you're a publicly traded company.
No, it does not. I read it several times.
You sure?
Absolutely, because I heard that mentioned, and it doesn't say anything about a publicly traded company.
so
I don't
it
want to
would-
dwell a lot of time
Okay.
on that, but
No,
go ahead.
so we'll address it, because
Sure.
what it is the redevelopment plan that was adopted for that project.
Yeah.
Okay, had changes to the zoning within it.
Okay.
And one of the changes to the zoning was for this project.
Okay.
To allow the used, CarMax to sell those used cars.
Okay, that's fine, okay.
So and that ordinance goes to planning board for consistency review. They get to see what that is. Then it gets back and gets adopted, and then that project comes in for site plan in front of the planning board and has to get approved that way. So it was addressed in the zoning, and that's the kind of thing where that's the change that can happen in zoning. I agree with you. It's in essence a use variance that's granted, okay? But it is done by the governing body, who is the entity that has the authority to change that zoning.
I understand all that.
All right.
I understand all that, okay?
Okay.
And that's really where that's the rub, okay?
Okay.
Because what has happened is that, and I'm a member of the zoning board, and I've been through a lot of use for a long time, so that's my concern. Other people have different concerns. The change in use of land is the issue that I see. There's a shortfall, okay? The zoning board has said, that's what they do. That's what we do.
No,
And
they
wait a minute, let me
interpret
finish.
it.
No, let me finish.
Sure.
Okay, I sat for a long time.
I'm sorry.
Okay, just let me finish. So, when there is a use variance or a change or in use of land, okay, not so much selling used cars, but land, there's a whole set of, you get professionals, you get your planner, your landscape, your engineers, and they prepare a plan. Oh, no, the developer prepares the plan, and then both sides are presented at the zoning board. And when you said that there will be notice to 200-foot residents around the property, the way it works without this plan, anyone can go to the zoning office and request, because it's advertised, to see the plan, okay? Now, the township committee is now doing this, okay? What I think is missing is that, and they do what they do, okay, but they're not, their expertise, their area of concentration is not on zoning issues. So they're not getting the benefit of all of the proofs and all of the evidence, and the public is not getting all of the benefit to see exactly what the township, now, there's two people on the township committee that sit on the planning board. The other three do not have that, even though they have equal vote, but don't get to see all of the proofs and the evidence and the traffic plan and the impact to the community, the same as the residents don't see that. So they can say, well, we like this, okay? But transparency is really the issue that I am concerned about. So if the plan would go to the zoning board to go through the normal process, it's been done hundreds of times, but in this case, it's short-circuited, that expertise, that area of concentration is lost, it goes to the Township Committee. Their intentions may be good, but they don't get all of the benefit of all of the professional reviews and back and forth, because the professionals that are the zoning board professionals can cross-examine the professionals from the developer, okay? And then they can advise the zoning board, okay? And decisions can be made. I don't see that happening in this particular case when and Richie, and I think anybody else that has sat on the planning board, you hear similar things. They just don't hear use changes. That's the shortcoming that I see in this whole process.
Okay. Let me
Please.
let me address a couple
Please,
things there,
please.
okay?
Yes.
Number one, zoning board interprets the zoning laws the committee passes. Okay? So your thought that all the expertise lies in that zoning board, it's only to interpret what they have adopted. Okay? The zoning board does not adopt the zoning. So if the one way that the board, the committee, could change that use variance is just change the zoning. Okay?
Okay.
No, let me finish.
Go ahead.
The authority does not rest with the zoning board. It rests with the governing body. They can change that zoning without the reason you have all those experts testify is because they're asking you to make an exception.
That's right.
They're asking for you to say, you tell us, even though you're not the guy that wrote the law, you give us permission to not follow that law. And we have special reasons for that, okay? So all I can tell you is that I get that you feel that the zoning board gets cut out, okay? But no, you feel that it gets cut out. And because of that, the public gets cut out
More importantly.
of hearing all of
More
it.
importantly.
But that simply, it matters on an engaging, to the extent the governing body is going to change the zoning in a property, it's incumbent on them to have, let the public know and understand what's being changed. And it's varying degrees, right? The CarMax project, you were like, well, that's no big deal. That's not, right? It's not that difficult of a task. So there really wasn't huge outreach about that because it was the changes that were made, the governing body determined it was better to get that rateable that would be a good addition to that business district. So in essence, they granted that variance by adopting the plan, okay? I can tell you, having dealt with those guys, if they had to go through the use variance process, they would not have come, okay? Because for a developer to come through that process, it is too uncertain. They have to spend a lot of money putting together all those plans for all those discussions, and they get to the end of it, and they find out, nope, not gonna let that happen, not gonna happen. And what this does, I get your point that it substitutes, but it doesn't substitute. It takes the decision-making back to the entity that has the responsibility to adopt that zoning, okay?
I understand
How
that.
they outreach to everybody and let them know what's going on, I know Trophy Park was the hot topic, right? But if that were ever to advance to more of a project, and I've been involved in a lot of them, big, Mount Holly, we had, 300 apartments taken down and a major housing development. Countless meetings as that project's being developed, concepts, changes, this, that, public meetings. That's one extreme, okay, which I suggest Trophy Park would have had to have been if it ever progressed anywhere. But CarMax is a different gig, right? CarMax is just one not really going to be commercial area, commercial project. There were some bulk changes they needed, and so that way. That's my only
Okay,
comeback.
let's talk about Trophy Park for just a second, okay? Because there was a memorandum of understanding. Okay?
Yes.
So, and I got a copy of the memorandum, and I also got a copy of the procedure, which is very similar to this, okay, which you have on the board. Steps 1 through 4 were this is from our zoning office or our planning office, governing body resolution referring to the planning board. Number 2, planning board prepares a report and holds a public hearing after giving notice and publication. Number 3, planning board adopts a resolution and sends it back to the governing body. Number 4, governing body adopts a resolution setting forth its final determination. Clerk forwards to the DCA and serves notice on property owners. Number 5.
I have.
Wait, well, I'm telling you this for, I'm trying to make a point. I'm not going to.
Go ahead.
I'm getting to number 5 and then I'll backtrack. The governing body adopts a resolution naming a conditional developer and authorize the execution of a memorandum of understanding with the conditional developer, right? So you got the developer, the memorandum of understanding. My point is you skipped the first 4.
Okay.
Because
Well, hold on, no. Now I'm going to speak, all right?
I opened it,
This
there
is
was
the-
nothing.
That's the past, Bruce. And what do you mean? Don't go like this. It's
You
the
got a
past.
process,
So
you're
we're
not
trying,
following it.
so here we are discussing it, talking about how we're going to change what happened in the past.
Okay.
And we are opening up, like I've always said, it's open book. So now we're trying, all right? The people that were up here before, maybe they didn't do things that way.
Okay, well,
This is
that's
how
true.
we're moving forward. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I'm just as frustrated as you are, I believe. I think you know that. I think everybody here knows that. They knew what went down that night. They knew how angry I was that night, all right? So now we are here now, all right? I want to look forward. We put up, there's our flow chart. It's out there for everybody to see. I mean, I'm sorry for getting upset, but it's
No, it's
it's
fine.
just, it's upsetting that now we're stuck on the past again, and I'm trying to move forward and try to do things, I don't want to say correctly. It was just some things where,
I think it's fair to understand where the mistakes were made. And that's what I'm pointing out.
I just have to address that. No, I'm just going to try to be quick with you. And because I understand this is like steps were skipped. No steps were skipped, okay? As you look at that list that was put together by, I don't know who.
Township.
Somebody in the office, okay? But the first 4 steps all relate to designation of an area, okay?
Okay.
Their designation of a redevelopment area. Your whole township is a rehabilitation area. Those 4 steps don't need to be done if you have a rehab area, okay?
Redevelopment or rehabilitation.
Is it redevelopment area?
no,
Park?
Rehab.
It's rehab.
it's rehab.
okay?
Is it rehab?
It's rehab.
Rehab.
So
It's not 'cause
listen,
it's-
I know everybody got hung up
No,
that
that's
these
why
steps were skipped.
That's
I'm
one thing I
telling
don't
you,
understand.
they weren't skipped.
It was vacant land. How do you rehab vacant land?
The entire, look.
Here's another thing that I
One
want to
question at
say.
a time, okay?
Question, how do you rehab
this is
vacant
this-
land?
That's what
Because
the
those are
entire-
the 2 words, like he said earlier, rehabilitation and redevelopment are words that the state uses, and we're kind of, it's semantics.
We're all trying to
For some
understand it,
reason, I don't know why the state did that, and it creates a problem, Jim, everywhere.
I think the
What's that?
entire,
It creates
Oh, it
confusion,
creates
not a
the-
problem,
the
confusion.
idea of
I'm
the
confused.
entire
Okay, I'll admit it. I'm
community
confused.
is
The
wrong.
township, so every redevelopment area, think of it this way. When you do one of these designations, say you're doing a block of houses, okay? Every house on the block does not have to satisfy criteria. The entirety of the area can be viewed that way, okay? So when this rehab designation was done, 18, okay, there was a planning report, there's a report done that went over and sections of the town were found to satisfy certain criteria, okay? Your planner did a report on it, that's
I
how
saw
it's
that.
done. So one property with, the prettiest house in town, okay? It's still in a rehab area, even though certainly it doesn't need rehab.
Understood,
okay?
sure.
So it's the entirety of the township that satisfies criteria. That was done in 18, okay? The list that you went through, that it jumped to the MOU, it didn't jump to the MOU. The rehab designation was done. okay?
Okay.
Once it's done, like tomorrow, if someone comes in and says, I want to build across the street, you know, a new office park, we could that night adopt an MOU to start discussions with that developer because those first 4 steps were already done, okay? If there's going to be, if they come in and say they want to do a long-term pilot, something that's not eligible under rehab and has to do redevelopment, those first 4 steps have to be done, okay? To designate it a redevelopment area if it fits that criteria. But the rest of your township does not, you don't have to do the rehab over and over and over and over and over again. Once you do it,
I understand
you do
that, sure.
it. That's it, okay? It's not that steps were skipped, okay? It's that this checklist is very misleading, it's not how we have done any of the projects,
But you can understand, I didn't make this up, you made it up.
No, I did not make it up.
Somebody made it up.
We did not make it up.
Okay, all
Okay?
right,
Promise.
okay. All right, you get my point.
I
Okay.
understand.
Thanks, Bruce.
Totally.
Burns, Manheim Avenue. So, looking at the presentation here,
Please speak into the microphones, please, everyone. Thank you.
I'm not seeing a big change from the way it was to the new proposal, other than more transparency for the public. You can still create an overlay district in RD5 zones, correct? Still rehabilitate or redevelop wooded land. So the only difference in the new proposal is notifying the public earlier, correct?
Correct.
So in the case of Trophy Park, the people, the residents that would have been notified, we're talking about 5, 6 people. In the future, you know, we got a big group together, hundreds of people that spoke up and obviously made their voices heard. In the future, that may not happen. So say somebody wants to develop something, a developer comes in, wants to go to Laureldale, 3, 4 people are notified in that area, it's still, the whole process can still happen, correct? So a new developer comes in the Trophy Park Woods.
Can
We're
we
in the
put
same
in the
place where we
ordinance
were.
that it has to be 1,000 feet?
You can do whatever you want, because you're, at this point, what we're suggesting
out for
is
public notice.
Hamilton's special rules. So you can do them however you want.
Yeah, 'cause
I mean, this is why we're doing this, so that we can hear some stuff and get some ideas and make whatever adjustments we feel need to be made.
I won't speak for everybody, but my concerns were that the decision is, no offense, in the hands of those 5 people. And not, the checks and balances don't seem to be there.
Well, I don't know how to remove that from you, but that's this thing called this democracy, and when you elect people, like, that's their job, okay? And so you get to, you get to voice it, you get to raise your concerns, which it sounds like you certainly know how to do that. But that's kind of how it all works. Like, if you don't like, curfews they place, or, trash collection rules, that's how it all works. You're not gonna get it to a position. If they were to adopt an ordinance today and say, we're not allowing any development on any wooded lot anywhere in Hamilton, the next guys that come here could adopt an ordinance and say, we're going to allow wooded development on any wood. Like, that's what you have a governing body
I guess
for.
just what I expected and hoped from the change would be to protect the woods. That's our whole.
So one of the things that came out of the due diligence that the Township Committee was doing with that proposal was that we had discussions with Pinelands and found out that in order for any development other than the R5 development to happen there, at least the development of the size and scope that was being proposed, the township would then have to take other areas within the township that were approximately 500 contiguous acres and downzone that in exchange for, what was it? And that was a decision that was, the committee would not even consider. That land And doing that due diligence is what that time period was for. So that land has protections through Pinelands, has protections through committee, has protections through public opposition, right, protection. It's privately owned land. And so there's only so much that the committee can do with that. And you can express your opinion, you can get together. There's other mechanisms, maybe you can look at other funding sources as a volunteer group to see if there's a way for you to get that preserved. But
My
it-
concern is the rest of the township too, not just that piece. of
Sure,
land.
and the part of the township, the majority of the township that's within the Pinelands has a different level of protections. And so the idea with redevelopment and rehabilitation is not to circumvent that. We work in conjunction with Pinelands. And so our intention is never to create an issue that the township doesn't want to see and the residents don't want to see. Our intention is to help the township get to a point where they want to be. And if they don't want to be, such as Trophy Park, we scale that back. We say, we're done. So you've been heard, the public has been heard, the concerns have been heard. And that is why we are proposing a process. And so, as Mayor Patali said, we're open to changing the process. It's something specific to your township. So, as far as what else can be done on that property, if the owner of that property wants to utilize that R5 zoning, he or she can. I don't know what that will do to the property. I don't know how much clear cutting that would allow. I can't answer that.
The
But
concern is more creating an overlay district and rezoning the rural areas. That's the whole.
And that could happen
crux of what
anytime.
you're-
That,
Right.
yeah, that's not just specific to redevelopment.
Yeah, and but it's got to be by ordinance, public notice, like there's a process.
And there's an additional layer of Pinelands approval. Pinelands has to review everything. I don't know if you were here at all for any of the cannabis ordinance review, but the redevelopment plan, the township-wide redevelopment plan was amended to allow for cannabis uses in certain areas within the township, some of which are governed by Pinelands. And Pinelands had comments, and Mr. Hurlis, the planning board planner, and myself. Oh, yeah, sorry, Craig. Sorry, Craig. Worked with Pinelands in order to ensure that the Pinelands restrictions that are applicable to those particular areas where the township had determined to allow those cannabis was correct. And so the changes that they required are the changes that we made.
and I think as you look back over the last few months with that project, you were given the opportunity to come out and speak, and you guys did, and you were heard.
And you were voted, and you wrote,
And-
and you were voted in.
So that's, the process, in a roundabout way, the process still worked, I mean, you were heard, so,
I mean, I have more faith, obviously, in the committee, but I really just thought there was going to be bigger changes. That's it. That's all I want to say.
Do you have a suggestion?
Well, I don't know all of the ins and outs, but definitely, like he said, more than 200 feet would be notifying people, would be, I don't know, notifying the public earlier in the process. Just not changing the zoning for, like, I don't know,
Yeah.
I don't know all the ins and outs, the legal repercussions of it, but just, our hope is that,
Yeah, the notice is for sure.
We do a publication, the newspaper.
I have to think about it more.
On the
I'm sure When I
website.
go home, I'm going to think of 10 different things. So
That's okay.
I'd like to-
You can let your committee know.
All right, thank you.
thanks, Sue.
I would like to make a statement. Hamilton Township was recognized as having some of the best zoning and land use ordinances in the Pinelands for years. Previous administrators had carefully negotiated reductions of 18,000 Pinelands mandated housing units to avoid overcrowding when rapid growth was occurring. They planned out a diverse community of various zoning locations to accommodate required residential growth, desired commercial ratables, rural residential areas, and preserved forest areas, as well as sensitive environment areas. All this resulted in designing a community that both served its residents and the township as a whole for very many years. And I think all of us on this dais, as well as the planning board, the zoning board, would be in agreement that this entire township being under redevelopment is somewhat skewed, somewhat disingenuous, and that only really 75% of our township is under Pineland scrutiny, and only 25% would be available. So that's my comment.
Hi, Audrey Palumbo. Carl, I know you don't want to go into the past, but if we don't look at what we did wrong, we can't make it better and we can't move forward. That is part of fixing this. And may I ask, on this board, this body, how many people are on that?
Could you speak closer to the mic?
Who is on this body that's making the initial determinations? All of you? No.
What do you mean?
Who?
What do you mean?
The ones that take in the initial applications before it goes any further. Is it everybody on the board
It wasn't.
that's
Oh.
part of this?
That's the proposal.
Yes.
It will
That's
be moving forward.
That's
And,
new.
and this is not set in stone. This is
Okay.
a discussion point.
Okay, I understand. The problem with this is, the whole thing is it's very political. We're happy where we are now, but that can change on a dime. You can be gone tomorrow, something happens, somebody else. And I think this whole situation was backdoored in the previous times, and that's where everybody is upset about this. Is it possible that when somebody applies for an MOU, that's the time to advertise it? That's the time to allow the public to know what's going on? Because it seems like we have to find out at the
ma'am,
end of it.
No, this proposal is even before the MOU is considered.
Okay.
Committee gets to
That's
take a
where we
look
have
at
to
that
get.
and
We
make a
have to get
determination
to-
of whether or not it's a project that they want to see move forward through the redevelopment process?
Well, the thing is,
Or
there's
just
certain
the
pro-
zoning process?
There's certain projects that absolutely had no right to even be entertained here, like this trophy park. Crime, pollution, traffic, this is not what we want for our town. We love our town. This whole thing was absolutely not even should have been looked at. Of course, people have a right to spend their money and bring in a development and go through the process. I would like you to all familiarize yourself with what just happened in Pleasantville, when a developer put an MOU in to develop the land for condos, restaurants, and waterfront property, and the people came out and said, oh no, we don't need an enclave that doesn't help our citizens. It was a very well-known builder. He walked away because the people said, no abatement, no, we don't want it. It doesn't help our citizens. It's been a very good, interesting process to read about in the AC Press. So the redevelopment is a misnomer, and perhaps the time to do that is to look through the areas, as Judy said, and just let's redesign the whole process and see where we are. But I really hate to think that a project that all the taxpayers and all of your constituents are going to be affected by is only going to be determined by the people that are coming out, that are finding out about it, and that's not everybody's able to do that. So we can't really make it a process where we have to rely on who we voted in this year, although that's our great hope, that we're going to go get better and do things better. But it really should be a process that's going to be good for everybody, no matter who's sitting on that board.
And that's, and I hear what you're saying, you're right. But like Jim Alley said, next year, whoever's up here, they could rezone.
That's what we don't want.
You know, so, you know, the worry you have about this could also be, you know, there's,
Redefine the process and redefine the areas, thank you for that, Julie. So I just want you to realize that we don't want to rely on political issues. That shouldn't be the way our town grows and brings in prosperity. It's not by who's voted in or who's voted out. Thank you.
I'm going to slide this up, okay? I think I know how to do this.
that's because you're a
no,
musician,
couple
you know how that works.
Not tonight.
No singing.
How we all doing? Okay.
Excuse me for
State your
just a
name,
second.
please.
Chrisman, member of the zoning board, planning board for 10 years before that, 10 years on the zoning board. I've been following this from the very beginning, from the get-go years ago. And I believe there's a lot of perks. You're showing us a lot of perks for the township. I think there's a lot of good things in this. But as I've been observing over the years, there's something that hasn't been mentioned. And I think we may all need to pay attention to this. Because this whole thing, though it's a lot of perks to it, and it can work for us, and we trust it would be in your hands. But there's something that's not being talked about, cannabis. When did all this start? This whole redevelopment, it comes from the state, right? State of New Jersey, this is their idea, right? Correct?
Cannabis?
I'm talking about redevelopment, the whole redevelopment plan.
Development's been in effect for 60 years.
Yes, I know it has, but when did it become pushed? About 4 years ago. No, about 4 years ago,
I've been doing
2000.
it for 35 years.
Okay, well, then you'll admit that around, okay, but
lot more than that.
all right, I'm not going to argue with your career, okay? But I've noticed, sitting on the zoning board and planning board, that there's a common denominator between all the state coming down with all of a sudden, well, they're going to do good things for us. They've got lots of money now. They're going to help us. They're going to give our townships more room to grow and make money. But also, there's a huge push with cannabis, okay? Just your firm alone, how many cannabis situations are you involved in right now with our township?
5?
Boy, come on, you put the list out today, I read it.
Well, I can answer that.
Please.
We are not involved with the cannabis. We work for the township.
Yes.
And the township made a decision to allow the
But
cannabis.
who is sending the rules down to the township and the municipalities that they have to have how many in Hamilton Township?
They don't, the state, the committee decided.
I know the committee decides, but the
But
state
you
is
were
also
putting it
telling
before
the
the-
municipality that cannabis.
They could have said no.
It's 4, I believe, isn't it?
The governing body could have opted out completely.
Everybody can say no. A lot of towns said no.
I know they can say no, but my point that I'm trying to make is, be very wary of what the state is, the perks that they're saying, this is a real good thing for us. Because you look at, we're in the state of New Jersey, I'll say no more about it. Usually what happens in New Jersey, we're about the 4th or 5th state to get trickled down to what starts in California, then goes to New York, then goes to Illinois, and then it comes to New Jersey. And what are we seeing? Pay attention. What is happening right now in 3 states in this country? All of a sudden, municipalities and cities in our country, in those states that I mentioned, are, well, let me just step back a second. With cannabis, it's not just a store that's going to open up and sell cannabis. There are many different forms of dealing with cannabis now in New Jersey, correct? There's growing it, okay? Then there's dispensing it medically. Then there is growing it and selling it in one body, okay? You can get a building somewhere and grow it and sell it. And there's also, which is now happening in 4 states in our country, they want to open up marijuana. I think the word they're using for it is social environment, okay? And they've already done it in California. Now New York's about to adopt it, okay? Where anywhere they can get it in, they're going to open up like a bar. Just go there and smoke your marijuana, which we have one already was with our township. Am I not correct? there happens to be a building sitting out there that was already built, and there was a little discretion about whether they're just going to be able to sell it, or are they going to be able to smoke it in there as well.
I can tell you that's prohibited.
Against the law.
That's not true.
But that's why the building's sitting there empty, isn't it?
No,
I
it's,
don't
No.
have any idea.
I know there's DOJ reasons for that also, I'm aware of that. But I do know that there were two different plans given for the usage of that building. Right?
One was medical and one was recreational.
Right, recreation.
Is
The
that
sale of-
Columbia Care?
recreational sales.
My point is, we don't have that here in New Jersey yet. Well, no, it's legal in New Jersey, but you can't open up a building, say, oh, we want to open up a spot down here on the Black Horse Pike, and we're going to have recreational marijuana smoking.
Nope, can't do that.
Okay? Yes, smoking inside.
Like a lounge.
Correct. Now, what the state is telling us now, you've got the right, you now can redevelop these areas. Okay, be very cautious. If we accept this, which I'm not against it, because I know there are good perks, and you've made some points, but it also puts us in a position where, and right before me, the word political was mentioned. It's happening. It's happening in our country. And I can tell you right now, New Jersey wants to be on that bandwagon. Okay? What is liable to come down the pike next? We may find ourselves in a situation where they say, well, no, you've accepted to be able to redevelop that area, so you're required to have to do that. And maybe we don't want to do that. And that's where it's going to get muddy and gray. And I'm just saying, I'm not against what you guys decide to do, because I see the perks in this redevelopment. I know it's something that we've needed in the area for quite a few years. But we've got to be very, very careful, because what's coming down the line in the future, and when I say future, I'm talking within the next 2 years, be very careful what we're grabbing onto. I'm just asking the Township Committee, I trust you, I'm just saying beware. Just some advice. Okay? Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Before the next speaker, could I ask that the camera be moved so I can see who's speaking? Right now, I'm looking at you guys, and as handsome and pretty as you are.
Hi, Art. It's Eileen Dix. How are you tonight?
Hi, I can't see you, Aileen.
Oh, you don't need to see me. You can watch me on TV.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My first comment is the comment about workshops. And as a student of workshops, they run 15 minutes to 60 minutes. I saw one, which I won't talk about, that went 90 minutes in the last 2 years. Workshops are brief. There's people here who routinely attend them. They could tell you more of what's said inside, because there's no other records. The second thing I wanted to make the point, and it ties right to Sue Burns. Not Sue Nate, Sue Burns. In the future, there will be no referrals to this office except by resolution of the governing body. In a contract, I did not file an OPRA for this year's contract. Don't know if it's ready or not. That's not the point. But I got an OPRA a couple years ago, and it said the administrator could refer to that office. And I've been attending these meetings, other than COVID when I couldn't, because the doors were locked. You people didn't authorize this stuff. It was just going back there.
And everybody up here, I think, has heard me say it, that needs to be
So-
talked about. And I'm only one person that would vote for changing that. I don't know what the other four would do, but
you
it's going to be
authorized,
discussed.
Unfortunately, and I didn't get to speak at reorg before you authorized the administrator to prepare contracts to all the professionals. I have always disagreed with that, but you can amend their, if that paragraph's in there, you can take it out. Or you could simply tell whoever's sitting in that chair, Brett, I hope you're in there for quite a while. Thank you very much. I appreciate your help. He won't He won't send anything to them unless he gets a resolution from you. That'll satisfy a lot of the public notice that Sue was looking for a few minutes ago. Not sending to 1,000 feet out or 200 feet out, that's not the answer. That covers what I noted tonight. But as you know, I have extensive, Mr. Malley, I've been here since I was actually 14 months old, lived most of my life except for about a year and a half here in this town, and this is like a steel trap. So what I've seen, what I've grown, grown up, I don't mean grown, yeah, I used to grow a garden in my yard, but that's the only thing I grew, like tomatoes. You understand, it's not that other stuff. Got it? You're good with that. This is the 3-page EDA report dated July 23rd. I'd like to make paper airplanes with it. I'm very upset with the content. They have no way to know how bad that content is. But people like our friends here who rode the school bus around the Black Horse Pike area. I walked to school because I lived in town. I don't know how it was determined to take the phrases delineated area from Cologne Avenue, Black Horse Pike, and Harding Highway, which that corner is the recipient of a affordable housing lawsuit, Harding Highway LLC versus the Township of Hamilton, 2005. So that project is covered by that lawsuit settlement, and that 600-home development is in hard engineering at this point in time, and it will run all the way up to the Walmart driveway, wrapping around the dentist and the liquor mart to Walmart, and I'm not sure how close to the Black Horse Pike. Then we go across to the mall, and on the north and south side of the Black Horse Pike, down to the township line. So everybody knows when I start reading this little one-page document that I have spent a lot of time on, everybody knows the area we're talking about, Cologne Avenue to the township line. Our report is right there. This report and the planning board minutes of July 5, 2018 have been reviewed. The statements in the report include designating a review section of our township. Said area was Cologne Avenue and Black Horse Pike from Harding Highway to the township line with EHT. The 50-year period, I passed, the 50-year period of 1968 to 2018 included are Consumer Square and Hamilton Commons. The deed date for Consumer Square, which is Wrangleboro Road, right by the expressway, 89 acres. The deed date is May 1, 1995. It was a total forest up to 1995 when Benderson Wainberg was working on their shopping center approval for that location. So that shopping center is after 1995. That is what, 28 years ago. Said report alleges 9 of 11 one- and two-family homes are over 50 years old. We lifers, we HT lifers, knew the families who lived on the Black Horse Pike at chicken farms, vegetable farms, and businesses founded due to World War II ending and the 1946 opening of the Atlantic City Race Course. Ehrlichs, Hertzbergs, Pernas, Sincatis, Mayers, Holzers, Chauffeurs, and Rainbows. Everybody remember the name Rainbow? I think you do. Which are the 11 homes cited? Are any remaining? In 2018, when this report was filed, what was on these properties? Ehrlichs and Hertzbergs are now Walmart, 2001. Holzers and Mayers are Shore Toyota. Perna's restaurant is now Toys R Us. You understand, all of these have happened since about 1990 or into this century. The population in 1970, the report is 1968, the census for 1970, we had 6,445 people. How many homes existed in 1970? I don't know that answer. By 1990 census, we were 16,012 people with 6,343 homes. So there weren't many homes pre-1968.
Where are we going? Because I want to be honest, it's 10 after 8. I'm
I
kind of
understand
hungry.
it's 10 after 8, and I got one more paragraph, and that's the punchline paragraph.
So this is a joke?
No, not at all. Not at all. If there's a joke, it wasn't on us.
The designated areas.
We were on, I said 6,343 homes. We were on a DEP sewer moratorium on projects not already approved. DEP said wait for the HTMUA to build a coastal alternative. The 7.5 million gallon a day sewer line to take our sewer flows to Atlantic City, which opened up all the rest of the development. That's to the east side of Mays Landing. In that report, it says the HTMUA, bullet point number 4, a majority of the water and sewer infrastructure in the delineated area is at least 50 years old and is in need of repair and maintenance. That statement is absolutely false. I was a 29-year commissioner on the HTMUA. You understand the foundation. Ergo, simply not possible to need repair. The delineated area cites various blocks and lots on our tax map. Among those lots are at least 3 HTMUA pump stations dated 1982, 85, and 99. Well 9 on Lowell Avenue, that's 1999. New Jersey Bell's substation on McKee Avenue, 1951. Easements that created Volunteer Way, and Arcombe, and CHOP, and the D'Imperio Dump Superfund site. This report that was the basis of this in need of rehab township-wide is flawed. We need to start over and rethink and maybe make a whole lot of changes. And this is a whole lot of work. And no, Carl, I didn't come here with a joke. I just am very upset with the way the whole thing has been handled start to finish. Thank you.
Anybody else from the public wish to speak?
Mr. Mayor, Committee, Jim Link, 676 Park Road, 763 Park Road. I don't want to take too much time, but what Aileen Dick just said, okay, is absolutely true. I feel the same way. When you develop laws, right, you develop them so they can't be abused. This particular set of ordinances and their amendments and the references, the referrals, you know, it started out as a good idea. And Art, I got to commend you guys because, when, you know, as former chairman of the planning board and sat up there as a member of committee, when you guys first brought that to the attention of the township, you know, it's like, wow, what a great idea. Okay? For all the reasons that you guys have expounded on tonight. Okay? However, it's not bulletproof, and we've known that over the course of time. So over the course of time, we've all found out that this thing has got some real problems, not just starting at with the entirety of the township. I get it, okay? You guys got a budget to put together. You guys need revenue so that we're not paying crazy taxes. I understand that, okay? But when someone comes to you waving money in front of your nose, as happened in the previous administration, people went nuts and said, let's go for it, regardless of what the planning board and the zoning board of adjustment had to say about that particular concept. And there were redevelopment statutes on the book. And before anything happened, the planning board that applicant was put in front of the planning board. And the planning board had 5 questions, I believe it's 5, maybe 6, I don't know. But it had to meet one of those criteria before the planning board would ask the township committee to come up with a redevelopment ordinance or a redevelopment plan. Didn't go the other way around, okay? So I believe one of the things that you should really consider is let these guys do their job. Let them look at it. Let them go to a workshop with the prospective applicant. I get it. We've been there, okay? But those workshops should be made a matter of public record, maybe like an executive meeting sometime thereafter, because I know developers don't want to spill their guts. They don't want John Q. Public knowing what's going on in the back office. I get it. But that's got to happen. I believe that you should not be cutting these guys out, just as an idea. But hey, Art, it's good to see you. I'm sorry you're not here in person, but thank you for your time.
Me too. Thank you.
Do you want to? Jim, Emily, did you want to say any?
No, just that what we've offered is just trying to come up with a process to help engage and have everybody have an early shot to take a look and voice their opinions. I hear everybody's concern that they want to make sure that no governing body can ever do anything that they don't like, okay? And it's just whatever rule you adopt, the next governing body can change that rule and say that's not what they're going to do. So the best way to make sure development does not happen that you don't want to see happen is set up a process so that you get early notification of it. And if it is that big a deal, that one guy that got the notice will say to somebody else, hey, yo, you know what's going on? Like the same way this happened. I know I wasn't here for all your Trophy Park stuff, but that process worked, okay? It didn't get the planning board. It didn't go through. It didn't get done. Agreements didn't get signed. None of that stuff happened, okay? What we're proposing, even with the notices you get, what we're proposing is double down on that to try to expand that so that everybody has a chance to participate more. And we'll go over this with you guys.
I may have misunderstood you, Jim. Did you say that at a workshop, there's no zoning board members and no planning board members? Because there are.
No. Anybody and their mother can go to that workshop, depending on who calls it.
Okay, I want to make sure everybody understood that, okay, I didn't know if I misunderstood you, or I don't want people misunderstanding. That's how rumors start. That's how, at a workshop, planning board, zoning board, members of committee, it's, as long as there's not a quorum, they can attend.
One thing about workshops, there is no minutes taken, nothing is divulged, so how are we to know what happened at the workshop if you're not there?
Which is
Go ahead.
why what we're proposing is it comes to you
Right.
first. Correct.
But then you don't,
The project before the governing body.
you still have to know what the workshop is about and how the zoning board and the planning board are viewing that. We, as elected officials, are not all knowledgeable about land use.
I understand, but the change we're suggesting is that the redevelopment projects come here, presented first. So even if you have questions, you'll know, you can get them answered. You can ask the questions. It gets here first, rather than going to the zoning workshop first, going through that process. It gets here first. That's
Very
the
good.
intent.
Before an escrow is even established, before anything is done, correct, Jim?
Yes, sir.
It comes to Township Committee, it comes before the public. That's the basis of the changes, which is basically the checklist that everybody talks about that was there before. Where it came from, where it went, I don't know, but the whole process of what we are looking at tonight is putting all that in place. So steps 1 through 4 will be met before it goes to a workshop, before escrows are established. Because if Township Committee doesn't like it moving forward and they don't want to even entertain it as a redevelopment project, then why should it go any further?
Correct.
Jim, I have a question that I don't know if you can answer this or not. And I think there's a lot of concern out there tonight about people who think that this rehabilitation has opened the door to some of the problems that we're seeing. If the whole town was not an area of rehabilitation, could Trophy Park still have went forward the way it did?
They would have to come.
I can't hear you, Jim. I'm sorry.
They would have, can you hear me now with this? No?
Yeah, I got you. Go ahead.
Okay, so if there was no rehabilitation designation, then developers of that project would approach the governing body and ask them if they would consider designating it, okay? which
As a
happens-
redevelopment.
As redevelopment, as a rehab. They might just ask for a
Right.
rehab designation. And then the
Right.
governing body would authorize to take a look at it and do it, so it would go that route. Most of the time,
So-
if that's happening, there's not a specific project that's like laid out when that's going forward.
Okay.
Or
So
they could just
basically,
go to the zoning board and start at the zoning board,
You could go and
correct?
just
Or
ask
go
for
to
the
the
use
planning board.
variance. Just go and ask for a use variance.
Right.
Right.
so basically that's what we have going on now with the way this is laid out. Am I correct?
Sort of.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
So basically, even though the area is, the entire township is an area of rehabilitation, with what we have laid out here tonight, it's as if it wasn't. Would you agree?
Well,
The
no.
fail-safes are there?
It is the step that allows you to enter into this MOU after a public presentation. All of that is only enabled because there's a rehabilitation designation, okay? The step would change. They could still come to you and you could do the process then, okay?
Right.
But just my 2 cents, I've been on a governing body for a long, long time. Your issues will never go away about what a governing body member decision is that you don't like, okay? Like, that's gonna be there no matter what. Whatever you put in place, whoever has a majority can change whatever a prior governing body. There's a rule in municipal government that the governing body can never act that binds the next governing body. That's just how this democracy thing works. You just need to always be on top of them. And that's why we've tried to structure this to have public presentations of what the concept is, have notices get out more than's required under state law, and give everybody a chance I think for 9 out of 10, everybody's gonna be, oh, it's a CarMax there, that's cool, we like that, that'd be great, this would be great. But for the one that is, take a third of town and do this, that's one that'll get attention from people and let you weigh in, let everybody weigh in. And you'll have fights about it. There'll be fights. Some people think it's a great idea, some people think it's not a good idea. You'll have fights about it, but that's why we just set the process up so that you get to have those fights, that's all.
Now, do we have to have a redevelopment ordinance in order to gain or submit and agree to a redevelopment such as they did in 2005 for the cotton mill? We didn't have a redevelopment ordinance then, and we were able to do that.
It was established in 2005.
Yeah,
It was a
for the
redevelopment.
cotton mill.
It was a redevelopment area for the cotton mill, yes.
Yeah, it was
And it still
specific,
is.
and so we didn't have to have it for the entire community in order to go through with that redevelopment.
If it's been designated a redevelopment area, then you can use the redevelopment authority, yes.
Okay.
And that's what that one was. And you.
But there is
you-
just
you amended it.
redevelopment, there's only areas of redevelopment in the township. Redevelopment and rehabilitation are two separate things.
And yes, and listen, that's a great example on how things can change, okay? Because the cotton mill was designated a redevelopment area in '05, and there was a plan in place to do wonderful things there. Nothing happened, so that authority under redevelopment was used to basically up the ante for that area to add eminent domain as an authority, okay? That was done, and when that was done, that is what has brought a redeveloper, the property owner now, to say, hey, okay, we're serious about this now, we want to start working, and they're working through through a plan, okay? So that's like a classic that even though in '05, I'm sure whoever talked about it, I would bet said, no eminent domain, bad thing, we're not gonna do it, okay? But as time went on and issues were there, they're pointing fingers now.
but you-
But as things went on, it changed to adapt to what the need was then.
Okay, but you're leaving out the big fire that took that cotton mill down in 2007. So that in itself has delayed all this process.
Okay.
Okay?
Hi, I'm Teresa DeRose. I live in Laureldale. My family's been in Mays Landing, Laureldale since 1974. You did a better explanation as to the redevelopment and rehabilitation. You did a much better examples of how they go. My question is the pilot. I have concerns on what the pilot actually means, because to me, pilot means like a temporary experiment. So are we going to, like they just did by the racetrack where they cleared that land that nobody knew anything about? Apparently their permits had expired and they did it anyway instead of renewing them. And so like for me, a pilot would be, let's clear this land, do this project such as a Wawa or, you know, a gas station for the next 10 years and see how it goes. Okay, that works. Let's do it over here now. Oh, that did good. Let's do it over here now. And that gets
I understand.
snowballs.
That's not the pilot I'm talking about. That's a pilot project where we're going to experiment and try something new. What I'm talking about, it's called pilot because it's an acronym for payment in lieu of taxes, PILOT.
Right.
It's simply a payment in lieu of taxes. So that is where we talked about how the money impacts the town. But that again is, you can do a redevelopment project without a pilot, okay? You can do a redevelopment project with a pilot. That all comes to the discretion of the governing body, has to be done through ordinance. So there's a first reading, publication, public notice,
Right.
then a second reading, a public hearing on it, okay?
Right.
So that's not the pilot I'm talking about. It's not a pilot. It's just simply deciding if the incentive is something that the township feels is appropriate and necessary to make a project happen.
Okay. Yeah, because I was thinking pilot, I wasn't thinking the acronym, because I remember the abatement and all this other stuff, but specifying pilot being in lieu of taxes.
That's what it is.
And then as far as the cannabis, I'm for and against it, because I know a lot of people who would very much benefit medically from cannabis. They have such a hard time getting it. Real people with real issues really need it. Seizure people, people with chronic pain, not just a bunch of people who like to smoke pot. There's a lot of people who really need it and would really benefit. They have to go to Atlantic City, they have to go to here, they gotta wait. Some people really need it. I know people who've died by not getting it because of the stupidness of getting it. And as far as other areas, I think it would be better to, as far as rehab or redevelopment, use the existing places instead of building new ones, like the ice rink. That was wonderful, wonderful area, people would go there. They took it down because of lack of people. You already have the plot there, the infrastructure. Put something else there instead of cutting down all the trees and putting up something else. We have the mall. Oh, they're New York owners. It's not zoned for this or that. New York owners. So what? Petition them. Hey, we got a use for this. Put the CarMax in there. You got Sears that can fix up the cars. They already have the infrastructure there. You know, you already have the parking spots. You already have the traffic. Perfect area. You know, the Hamilton Mall. They took down all the movie theater. The malls are empty. Put in office buildings. Put in, you know, I was here one night when we talked about the senior citizens. They don't have a place to go. There's areas in the mall, designate them. Every Tuesday, let's go there. We got all that traffic. The bus goes right to them. You know, use that instead of taking, because to me, no trees means no air, means no problem. If you don't have air, then guess what? You don't breathe. No problem. You know, oh well, that's the way it goes. No trees, you all die. No problem. You don't have to worry about taxes. You don't have to worry about Jack. And as far as notifying more people, you know, you do need to notify more people because it's a surprise for the people who are too busy to find out, you know. Put a notice in the mail, you know. Put more notices on Facebook. We're all on Facebook, you know. It doesn't cost much, you know, but
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you.
But save the trees.
Motion to close public comment?
Motion.
Second,
All those for closing?
we got, hold on.
Got one more.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't looking up.
I just need some clarification. So I know we talk about rehab and the state and whatever all this stuff is, and it all means everything different, but words have legal meanings. And they come back to bite us in places we don't want to be bit. So what I say about that is when we're talking about rehabbing trees, I just don't understand how the entire township has been designated to be rehabilitated. And why is it not just sections of the township that require it? I think that would answer a lot of our angst in this room. If we looked at the blight is growing. Why are those areas not the ones that are considered for the redevelopment and rehabbing? It's very simple. We have a precious commodity that we should be honoring because it makes it a place people want to come to. These games that we're playing is keeping business from here. And I'm not for Trophy Park because of where they wanted to do it. But the way we're doing this, who would want to deal with any of this? I wouldn't at all. It doesn't look good for us. We're a good community, hardworking people. We've all been around forever. I've been around, born, brought to the same house I live in right now. We can come to a consensus and fix this, but there's got to be a better way. There just has to be. We have to look at this whole township. Is this worth all of our angst so that we have something to fight about? I really don't want anything to fight about. We got enough trouble in the world.
New projects, not just anything. Yeah.
You know, but is there a possibility? I mean, I thought that's kind of why we were coming here to kind of rethink this. Is that a possibility? If it's not, then just say it. If we're bound to some kind of rule that the only way we can have this rehab is by taking over the entire township, then say it. And if not, then tell us what we need to do next in order to come up with some suggestions and some ideas and answers to these solutions. So it's not on your heads, it's on all of our heads together. Just simple. I thank you for taking my time. Taking my time, get it?
Thank you. Anybody else?
Are we going to make a motion again?
I'll motion.
Second.
Close public portion.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it.
Motion to close.
Oh, yeah. Motion to close?
Motion.
Motion to close, second?
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Now we can
Meeting
close.
closed. Thanks, Rich.
I mean, sure that.